What is up, everybody? Welcome back to another video. In today's video, we are back with another draft profile breakdown video, and today we are here to pick up right where we left off with another edge defender and another Senior Bowl participant. However, this Senior Bowl participant, he was named the best player of the practice week. So let's get it started. Welcome, everybody, to another video. Glad you guys are here. And yes, man, we are back with another draft profile video. To keep a long story short, my goal for this series is to make these videos as short as possible. If you guys know me, my videos tend to get way too darn long. So I'm going to have to leave out some clips. I'm going to have to leave out some detail, but I'm going to do my best to hit on the key points that I really want to drive home. We usually put together a little chart like graphic at the end like we did with Cedric Johnson, so you can see where I'm really grading the player. I have some of these that will probably just go on DoseOfDion.com just for time reasons alone, but I want to get as many of these videos out as I can to you guys. So I want to minimize the editing and minimize how darn long this is. I don't want this to be an hour long because it absolutely could be. So just keep that in mind. I'm trying to keep this like 10-15 minutes, but it's probably going to be closer to 20, but we'll see. With that being said, let's waste no more time because it's valuable. Let's dive into Darius Robinson, the defensive end out of Missouri. Now, this was a player that absolutely showed out at this year's Senior Bowl, but let's do a quick little background first. What may stand out about Darius Robinson, if you look up his profile on Missouri's website, is that he's listed at 6'5", 300 pounds. And when you watch him, you're like, there's no way this guy is 300 pounds. Well, there's a reason for that. The reason that he is listed at 300 pounds is because of the backstory. This is a player that played on the interior defensive line for Missouri through his first 4 seasons with Missouri. He was a 5-year player at Missouri, and in this past season, statistically, had his best production, and obviously now he's getting a lot of hype around the NFL draft circles, it sounds like. Again, I haven't even looked at a mock draft yet. I know it sounds, I literally have not looked at a mock draft yet, so I'm doing my best to, again, just keep these opinions how I feel about a guy. So if I say something like, yo, that don't align with what they're saying, hey, it's just my opinions. I'm here to give you guys my opinions on what I see from these players. That is a very important note here with Darius Robinson because I think when you look at some of the skill set and you look at some of the things that he brought to the table this past year and some of the areas where you're like, okay, that needs improvement or that doesn't look great, a lot of it probably can tie into the fact that he's really only been playing as a pure edge defender for one full offseason and season within this Missouri defense. And it took a little while. He's also had to battle through some injuries recently a calf injury, so he's had to deal with those things as well. And it wasn't off to the hottest start, to be honest, in 2023. And then it was. And then he got rolling, and you can see it just by his production alone. You're like, yeah, the stats look pretty darn good here. But this was one of the most fun players to watch. This guy was a joy to watch. Every game was super exciting. I was just waiting to see something new, and probably the most exciting game was honestly him against Ohio State. He decided to participate in their bowl game. We know that there were some key players that did not participate in that game. They were not in a college football playoff, but he did. And it really stood out. I'll show some examples of this one. Was first half versus second half. When the first half you're watching, you're like, oh, this does not look great. And then the second half, you're like, oh my goodness, here he goes. There he goes, because he had been really darn good in all the games that I went through to that point. So let's not waste any more time. You can see it on the left side where his starts, where his games played come into play here. And then again, as you can see, heading into 2023, dropped under 300 pounds. He is officially listed right now at 6'0", 6'5", 286 pounds. I think that definitely represents where he was probably playing at a little bit closer. Honestly, he could have been lighter than that, to be honest. But then the question is, where does he fit in the NFL? But I will make this comparison. Again, these videos are for everybody out there. But as a Lions fan, and I'm not saying he's this player, let me make that clear. He's not this player. But as a Lions fan of a team that just drafted Aiden Hutchinson, as you know, the NFL season is coming to a close. However, Super Bowl 58 weekend, and if you want some inside info and picks advice from award-winning sports bettors before the big game, go over to BetUS Picks and Predictions channel on YouTube or hit the link in the description. They have you covered. You're going to want to hit and be successful on those final bets that you place for the last game of the 2023-2024 NFL season. And as you can see right here, Super Bowl preview and prediction. So go check that out. Click that top link. But also with BetUS, who's partnered with us throughout this NFL season, they have an amazing new promotion. They'll give you a 125% bonus, not only on your first deposit, but on your first 3 deposits. That's right, first 3 deposits with the promo code JOIN125 or JOIN125. Plus, they'll give you a 10% gambler's insurance for your net losses if you are active every 6 months. All right, so again, that link will also be in the description. Shout out to BetUS. Now let's get back to the video. As a Lions fan who also started as an interior defensive lineman with Michigan, but later transitioned into playing kind of that edge role in that Michigan defense as a stand-up edge defender, we've seen this happen before, and we've seen it work before. And you see some of the skill set that translates, and you're like, that makes sense that he was an interior player, because what he's really good at, an interior player, you would expect, would have to do a lot of work with that. Where he needs growth, probably what more an edge defender would have to deal with and bring to the table. But this is definitely an impressive player, and there's not a lot of guys that can say that they started full seasons both on the inside and outside and been productive, honestly, in both spots. My main focus was this past season, however, so just keep that in mind. My main watching was from 2023, and here's what I took away. So we'll start here. Important trait, of course, maybe the most important trait is the get off. It's that first step, and to me, I ended up giving him here a great grade. I was getting close to pushing this thing to an elite grade. Like, he was incredible at getting off the line of scrimmage. Now, part of this maybe you can attribute to, okay, he played on the interior, so the quickness off the ball, the reaction timing, anytime you've seen him step in, like if it was an obvious pass down, maybe at a 3 technique, you'd really see him go. And again, a couple of offsides calls here, but nothing that really stood out. It was mainly the fact that this guy could launch off the line of scrimmage, and he really checked a lot of boxes here, whether that was length and distance that he was able to cover. You know, sometimes his, initial step could be a little bit onto it, and you're like, oh, he's wasting a little bit of time here. But honestly, he was so adaptable that he could get off the line with, utilizing just a right foot, left foot, single foot forward. He could launch off the line, cover a ton of depth if he wanted to. He would change it up based on his pass rush plan. He could also time the snap up incredibly well as well. It was harder to find examples where he wasn't great off the line, and there were also examples where he beat everybody off the line of scrimmage, offense and defense. So to me, his first step, it checked the box really across the board. He is an explosive, dynamic athlete off the ball, and at the same time, he also times it pretty well, covers a ton of depth as well. And this translates both being a pass rusher and as a run defender. From a run defensive sense, because even in this past year, while a majority of the snaps came outside of the tackle box, played a lot of 9 technique this past season, played as a strong side DN. What also stood out was when he would step inside, and we did see, especially early in the year, some 4-eye, which would mean inside shade of an offensive tackle. And again, the reaction speed for him, I thought he made his money, and we'll talk about this a lot, by winning the balance battle, but then also just beating you to your spot. And a lot of that came back to his ability to just get off the line, read what you were doing, step in front of that, win the balance battle. You were off balance, and now I'm going to beat you with my hand placement, my length, and you're going to have a problem. So not only was he beating you with length in terms of look how much distance he can cover with that first step, but it was also the fact that he could beat you with lengths in just terms of his arm length alone with his height. So Darius Robinson, first step, pushing elite there to me. I have to talk about, of course, his ability to just rush the passer. What does his pass rush look like? And what stood out to me, the most impressive thing, and I'm going to give you a quick example here, was this Ohio State game. It was the first half versus the second half. The first half did not look great. The second half was like, oh, okay, there he is. That's the guy that I expected to see. But what's so impressive about Darius Robinson is the fact that he has a lot of ways that he can win. He did a really nice job of adapting to how an offensive tackle specifically would set against him and play him, and he could adapt as the game went on, and he showed just tons of different ways to win. But at the same time, some of his go-to moves that were very consistent for him, and this makes sense being an interior player, the push-pull move, man, it was a go-to, especially for offensive linemen and tackles that would try to short set him. I mean, he would absolutely live here, quick wins, SEC schools, and he would dominate with some of the push-pull wins on some of those short sets by offensive tackles, right? Trying to get it into his chest quickly, and he could win immediately off the line. The length that he had off the line also was his ability to adapt the way that he got off the ball, okay? It wasn't always just about being the fastest upfield or covering the most depth, right? It was about setting up that offensive tackle. So his ability to adapt after that first step and through the first step to, okay, the tackle setting like this, let me now cover the ground, let me stab outside, get back inside, get on the top of his shoulders, and then push, pull, and get down on the play.
Here's an example against a run, but he's going to dump this right tackle here of LSU on the play. And again, the burst off the line of scrimmage reads the offensive line. He's so quick to the point that the tackle has to adapt. Then you see the lower back flexibility. He's going to sink down, but he's balanced. Tackle's not on the play, so he's able to dump and then get into the run.
It was, to me, also some of the flexibility has to be spoken to here. I think that he has very sufficient hip flexibility. You really see that working the edge. Some of the weird off-balance things that he was able to do was awesome, as well as good ankle flexion as well for a guy at his size. Pretty darn impressive. You'll notice it in pursuit as well, kind of the ability to just stop and redirect. Now, it's not as launchy, some of the transitions, we'll talk about it, but just the ability to stay on his feet really stood out when you talk about some of the flexibility here. But to me, where he beats you across the board is his ability to come to balance and get you unbalanced as an offensive tackle. And as a pass rusher, we talk about that, taking on half the man on the bull rush, right, on the play, getting him off balance, getting him to overextend, to reach, and then I can beat you the opposite way. And that's where he was so consistent, right, setting up the push-pulls out of that. You want a short set, you want to be aggressive, great, I'm going to play into that, take this one step, and then boom, I'm on your shoulders. And he had a really good ability to sense the range and how close he needed to be to get his hands and then control that battle kind of early on the play. And then he also started to demonstrate some of those outside wins. And this is where I specifically want to focus on this Ohio State game. So you saw in the first half they were doing things like sliding protection his direction, and you saw really patient play by their tackles, which I think was huge here. They weren't being overly aggressive, so that inside stab was not getting them to take a step inside and creating pass rush lanes where you could attack half the man or get you off balance and then come to balance balance. Instead, they were playing a very patient style. They were getting in his chest. They weren't reaching. And because of that, it wasn't the best first half for him. Then the second half came around, and he had to find different ways to win versus what he consistently wins with. And this is what stood out. Let's look at a couple of different examples here. First one against Ohio State, and this is where you're going to see him kind of change up that first step. So now he elongates. You see how that first step, he really gets out with that first step. Now the offensive tackle, short setting, wants to be aggressive. He steps wide outside on the play. That steps up his ability to plant, redirect back inside. Now he comes to balance, tackle is off balance, which is where he wins, gets on the pads, and then in that case, he's able to create that kind of second effort win. Again, you also see some of the flexion there, still able to help redirect the quarterback on this path. Now, onto the second look that you have, and now here's an outside win. So again, they're aggressively trying to get into his chest. They understand that the push-pull win is going to come. So for him, launching off the line of scrimmage here, but now instead of doing that little push-pull win where he wants to stab and then get on top of your shoulders, the offensive tackle is going to start to play into that. Now he's going to go over top on this play, come down with the swipe, and then again, continue to try to work around the edge on the play and start to kind of close and squeeze that pocket a little bit. Now, against the left tackle once again, here's where he plays off of that, and this was one of the prettiest moves that I honestly saw from him the entire season. So again, now the offensive tackle is expecting, okay, now he wants to try to win on the edge on this play. So he gives you the same look, then he stabs hard outside. Offensive tackle now opens up. You can see how he's no longer square to the line of scrimmage on the play, and that's when he's able to break down, slow down his momentum, stop like he's going to work back inside. Offensive tackle now shoots his hands, and then he's able to go again on the play. Hand swipe down, now he wins around the edge. So now you see him setting up an offensive tackle based on a different look that he started to give in the second half. And you just see some of the craftiness. Now, part of this is he's also reading the tight end because this is something that you do see him do a ton. But again, it's also some of the craftiness here to get the offensive tackle. Now here on the right side, on the right tackle, get half the man. You can see the offensive tackle shoots. Now he's on that shoulder, and then he's able to dip and rip through it, and now again force the quarterback out of the pocket. And then to finish it off, again with another outside win, which is not consistently his game, you get this little speed change to then beat the left tackle. So this was the most impressive performance because the first half was so darn quiet, but at the same time in the second half, he was like, all right, I'm going to have to adapt. I got to find somewhere else to win. And that was huge to me, was finding a second way to win. What I noticed as a pass rusher, some of the knocks that I have here, and some of this plays into play strength as well, where I gave him more of an average grade. Part of this is, number one, as a consistent bull rusher, I think one thing that lacks is that he doesn't continue to get consistent good leverage, and it also tends to kind of die out, especially if it's there immediately.
Now, as I talk about some of the lower body flexibility, one area I do feel like he lacks a little bit is knee flexion. He doesn't get a lot of knee bend, and because of that, again, that's the reason that you don't see a ton of that consistent bend that continues through some of these bull rush opportunities. It kind of dies out a little bit. This is not a bad example.
It's just maintaining good leverage. So there's that. The walk back continues to end because there's not great leverage when he sinks down and he tries to just drive you back to the pocket. So whether that's the versatility of long arm moves, the outside wins that he starts to do, the push pull that he can kind of lean into, he shows an array of different ways to be creative and win.
So like I said, versatility and also reading the tackles. Here's a great example against Florida. You're going to see them show slide protection on this play, and he's going to slow his momentum down, read that, and that's when he's going to get this win around the edge because he's going to open himself up as that tackle shoots, and then he can win the outside.
Change the speed, just find a different approach to attack it off his tackle, and of course, this would have been the last game of the season, so maybe things were a little bit more dialed in at this point. Another little knock that I have would be kind of the second effort on the play. Now, that's not to say that he doesn't give effort. He continues to work, and I think, again, one of his best assets is that he's very flexible and also the hand usage that he has as well.
So these are two examples against the run, but again, I like the quickness off the line, his ability to adapt his footwork here, speed it up to the offensive lineman as well, position himself to make sure he's balanced, and then it's the fast hands, the length as well, and he gets these quick wins here against the run.
He continues to work, continues to fight into plays, and he does a really nice job not working outside of the pocket. He has a really good feel of, okay, when am I too far? I got to plant, get back inside, and now I got to try to collapse this pocket. However, it's kind of that second pass rush move. It tends to kind of stall. After the first one kind of dies out, it tends to really stall off. One of the other knocks that I have for him as a pass rusher really comes through some of that just pure agility. And to me here, this is where I think, number one, it's going to need a lot more refinement, but also on top of that, it could be just a slight limitation for his body type as well, and that's understandable, right? You don't get a lot of pass rushers that can literally do everything at a super high level. Didn't see a ton of spin moves from him as well, just kind of throw that out there. I saw like a few examples of him try it, but none of them seemed to really do anything. But I will say, and it was just kind of ugly, it was like in place, it was like, all right, see, I saw the flexibility there, and to me, it's the inside consistency, winning inside, and to me here, it's this aspect. Number one, there's not a ton of slither in his game either, but then I would also throw on top of that, creating lateral depth, right? Being able to press an outside tackle, an offensive tackle who wants to play on the outside, wants to protect the edge, being able to get that lateral win. Number one, I think there's occasions of him just not closing enough gap or enough distance with the offensive tackle where by the time he starts to kind of slant back inside, the offensive tackle can easily redirect and get back in position, and especially now you're talking about NFL offensive tackles, like they're going to reposition, they're going to take that away. So there's that aspect. That limits him a little bit. Number two, he doesn't create a lot of depth for those inside pass rush routes, but really in a lot of ways kind of that sidestep. And this is like an area where, speak about agility, again, we're going back to Hutchinson, this is where he was elite coming out of college. Like he had so many wins like this, and you don't get those same kind of wins here from Darius Robinson. He also doesn't cover the same depth. You also see the footwork tends to be kind of ugly as well. He's gotten wins here. We saw wins here in the Senior Bowl, but they're not pretty wins. They're not pretty wins at all. His feet cross over. He doesn't create a lot of depth, and he's kind of just like running into a wall. Again, he doesn't have a ton of slither with it either, so he's too easy for offensive tackles to redirect, and he doesn't get consistent wins there, whereas an offensive tackle, if you were just protecting the outside over and over, where you would feel like he's just going to eat that up all day long, because that hasn't really been his game. That's one of those areas where I think he's definitely going to need to improve big time, just a little bit limited. Now, in terms of, again, that hand usage, and this is where also, to me, again, a lot of it stems back to, we know these work together, right? Hands and your feet, right? Are they kind of on the same page? Are they working together? And he strings his hand usage and footwork together really well, man. Those things are always on the same page. He wants to go here, his feet, match it. Even if that first move doesn't win, he does a really nice job continuing to fight his hands free, get a hand free.
It's a great example of those two things tying together. The footwork here on this stunt where he's going to loop back inside, but then also the hand usage to recognize fast hands, get on the chest, control the block early, and then he's able to push, pull down, and get free.
It also shows up against the run as well, where consistently he has a hand free and he's able to get off blocks, especially on backside pursuit. You'll find him just kind of racing over to the play because he's able to get himself clean some way or another. But a lot of it, again, to me, comes back to balance. So for an example against the run, right, if you can recognize the offensive line is sliding to the right and everybody's taking that right step, his ability to quickly get off the line, press and match that, right, to step back in front of that. Let's say he's protecting the inside, he's in a 4-eye, to step in front of that and then take it away. Now that offensive lineman is in a spot where they're reaching, they're not on balance. He does get to balance, and then he can drive you back into play.
This is an example of it working both ways. Here, everyone slides to the right, the tight end, and you can see him speed up his footwork. So he initially takes his inside step, and then he speeds it up quickly to get into the chest, throws off the change of pace there in the burst to then get his hands on first, control the block, come to balance, and then he drives you back out.
That's where he thrives, is his hand usage just a lot set up by the footwork and his ability to come to balance in really awkward positions, but also the burst and quickness that he also brings. But what I love about his hand placement is the initial point of attack consistently inside. And when I say that, I mean he does a nice job of being able to maintain power. The way that he brings his hands inside and where he shoots from, he's going to maintain consistent power, where even if they don't hit cleanly, it's still going to be there. It's also very hard to get a clean grab and really kind of stall him out as an offensive lineman because his hands consistently are popping right in front of his chest. So it's very difficult for an offensive lineman to kind of lock him down and really kind of wall him off. At times we've seen it, but it's not a ton. But at the same time, there's also the instance of where he's able to still generate a lot of power through that initial punch because of that. Strength, to me, it's where it's a little bit limited. We talked about the bull rush a little bit. I think off the line, you see the ability to kind of bend at the back, flat back a little bit, get really good knockback at the initial point of attack, but it's maintaining that throughout the play where he's definitely a little bit limited.
On the interior, it wouldn't be about as much as just a pure leg drive back because it'd be a lot more quick wins, getting into your chest quickly, controlling the block, and then being able to go off of that and transition into a shed, whether that be a swim over top, kind of a herky-jerk sideways movement, and he could do that. That's why I think he had success in the interior. But on the edge, it's a little bit different because they're going to continue to drop back in their pass sets, and then you're trying to continue the bull rush. And to me, again, some of the knee bend that lacks dies out some of that continuation of some of the walk-back ability. Now, for him, even this, you can see not a ton of knee bend here, but you see as he still is able to get under the pads. And to me, that's all set up by the way that he approaches the tackle high on this play to just get under the pads.
I think he's a really nice edge setter in terms of not necessarily the aspect of consistently being disciplined and staying where he's supposed to stay, but more so about just his ability to either immediately get a shed on the play like he's playing defensive tackle at edge, so a tackle tries to approach him aggressively, slides right over top, swim move, push-pull, gets right off the block immediately on the play, consistently keeps himself free. And again, that first initial punch, it's a footwork off the line. It's shooting upfield and being able to adapt and then get in your chest, and then the tackle's not on balance. They're not square. And that's where he throws guys off, as he's consistently winning that balance battle.
One thing that I think you have to point out is he always seems to know where the run is supposed to go, where the ball carrier is supposed to be. Now, of course, that can get him into trouble. We'll talk about some of the discipline in a second. But if you notice on the backside when he's free, just racing down plays, it's also because of just his ability to identify the offensive line block. blocking scheme and where then the ball should be going because of that. And he's also able to get himself clean so quickly. And again, comes back to balance. I'm even showing a pass rush opportunity here just to show kind of the same example, getting to balance quickly, winning quickly. It all kind of ties along here. Try not to say the same thing over and over, but it does. And to me, the run defense is he's always around the ball most of the time outside of counters and things like that because he knows where the design is meant to go based on the offensive line scheme. He does a great job of recognizing that. And I think from the interior play, that's proven to transition.
There's aspects that I think do need refinement, like, for example, taking on pulling offensive linemen. Even when he recognizes it at times, he's really not putting himself in a position to stack and shed. He's kind of just pushing himself out of the play, or he'll kind of throw himself into the block, but he's not really settling himself down or positioning himself to give him a real chance. He's kind of just flying past to play, playing so aggressively, and you like that aspect out of him. We'll talk about the discipline in a second, where that can lead to some issues, but to me, that's like, those are one of the areas where he needs refinement, taking on pulling offensive linemen. I've seen teams kind of just go at him in terms of just attacking that aggressiveness, and there was good examples where he's very adaptable. So if he sees a certain run scheme, like, for example, if you continue to run a QB sneak, at some point he's just going to jump over there, get out of his spot, and try to go make a play. So you get kind of the good and bad to that, where he'll play out of his assignment trying to make a play based on what he senses, but at the same time, the bad to that is he plays out of his assignment a lot, and that's a big-time problem, especially on the edge. We talk about the discipline and now the quarterback rushing as a threat, and we saw teams just kind of go at him there. First off, you had him on a similar run scheme that we already saw on the backside. He's trying to track it down. He has great closing ability, so he's already seen this. He's taken off the backside, but then you flip it around and they run an end around off it, and you can see him dive down to the play. The end around comes around. They end up scoring a touchdown, but that wasn't the only example. You'll also get it on a quarterback rollout here where he's kind of peeking inside, just being too aggressive with it. Sometimes he doesn't know where the ball is, but it's mainly here just being way too aggressive, getting out of his spot, doing too much. Quarterback gets outside. Now, he can lean on really good athleticism to get back into the play, but that's not consistent at the NFL, right? You have to be more disciplined, and he can get completely out of some of that discipline. The read option also has gotten him on a big chunk play as well. So we've seen him be attacked in attacking just some of the pure discipline. Screens, there wasn't an example of a screen where he was on top of it. In terms of just that football intelligence, you can see that it feels like at times he's processing what's taking place. Like, it's not as fluid as like, okay, I just kind of feel it. Like, I can feel it on my vision here that this guy's doing this. Let me read this. Instead, you can see him almost trying to read everything like a step at a time at times, but he still plays it really fast. But you can see his eyes go to tight end, then he goes to tackle, and it can be a little bit slower than you like in terms of just that process. But I think that also just speaks to the upside because it doesn't feel slow when you watch him. You can just see that he's seemingly just trying to process things. But I do like his sense of offensive line scheme reading, and to me that comes from that interior background probably a lot. His ability to read where an offensive line is going. Like, okay, they're shifting this way. Where do I need to get to on the play? They're sliding that direction. Okay, it's a zone to this direction. Here comes a pulling lineman. He dove down. Tight end's coming around. Like, he does a nice job of identifying where movement is happening and identifying then what the run scheme is likely to be set up off of that. Now, again, the downside is he can be very aggressive and then just get put out of the play like the end around, but he's very adaptable, and his football intelligence is there. It's just about the process, I think, continuing to get faster at playing at that specific position if he continues that in the NFL. And then finally, a lot of the athleticism, again, that closing ability, and he is dynamic in terms of his ability to close. It's actually the first word that I wrote down here. Straight line speed, he's extremely dynamic in that sense. I think he takes awesome angles, especially in pursuit, run plays off the backside. I love the way that he gets on top of run plays, chasing ball carriers down the field. So that closing burst is really there. I mean, the only thing would be occasionally he overruns plays, but again, it's still the ability to come to balance, which is just so impressive. I mean, he can kind of run like out of his shoes a little bit, chasing a quarterback down, but outside of that, I think his closing ability is great. And then you move on to the motor. And honestly, the worst to me that it looked was in the Senior Bowl game. He didn't play a ton in that game, but as I wrote down as I went through every game, one of the things that I specifically wrote down is he just doesn't take plays off. I mean, when he's out there, his hair is absolutely on fire all the time, right? He is an aggressive, he's a feisty defensive player, and I never questioned his motor one time in any of the regular season games that I went through. And then in the Senior Bowl, it's like, okay, that didn't look amazing, but it's such a small sample size that I'm going to go based on what I saw a majority of. He looked awesome in terms of the motor that he plays with, the pursuit that he plays with, doesn't seemingly take plays off. Just to be able to make that position change that late to really help out this defensive front and had a great season for Missouri, I think speaks a lot to him, right? And there's a reason that he was named that for the Senior Bowl. So to me, there's some potential athletic limitations, especially the agility. When I look at him, I think he's best represented to be a defensive end and edge defender in the NFL. Again, he's got that body type where he could step in, kind of play that 4 4-eye role if you wanted to. It's like the opposite almost in a way of like a Will McDonald, who last year came out, played 4-eye, and it was like, why is this guy doing it? He's like 240. What is he doing? But this is a guy that you could actually play more into that role in the NFL. My thing is this. I think with kind of the hit and miss bull rush, I think it's much more created by balance, which is why I don't see consistent wins in the interior. So for me, I actually like him a lot more on the edge as a pass rusher. He's ability to open up some outside rush lanes. Again, he doesn't have elite bend at the top, but I think it's sufficient in terms of the hips. I think he has great ankle flexion as well, consistently stays on his feet, and he can create long arm move, you can take half the man. He showed outside and through the offensive tackle wins. It's just about really developing the inside pass rush wins, and this could be the biggest concern because of some of the lack of slither, is that how much space are you really going to be able to create in the NFL? It makes a ton of sense that this would be a concern, because to me, that needs to be developed and improved upon. That is the biggest concern. Against the run, you have to dial in that discipline. He can easily play on the interior against the run, the push pull, all those things will stand up there, and especially in sub packages, you could do it.
I don't view him as a consistent walk-back, bull-rushing interior presence, but I think he can win very quickly, and he's so quick off the line, and he's so quick to adapt in the interior that there's definitely that capability on sub-package. Yeah, you can move him around, but even on early downs, you could put him in as a 4-eye. He could be effective as a run and pass rusher, and then you could sort of minimize maybe some of that, lateral quickness in terms of question marks they have there for the inside, but you could also potentially minimize some of the consistent walk-back that's necessary because of just the way that offensive linemen are setting, and instead he can play into the quickness strength. However, I think he has more than enough of an array of pass rush that he can lean into, be it a very effective edge defender, and I think that's real flexibility heading into the next level.
His ability to adapt alone and find ways to win, his FBI to me stands out, and because of that, I really bought into this player. The effort that he plays with, the versatility that's there as just a defensive front player. Again, we said like Hutchinson, that guy was an interior player, moved to the outside. Hutchinson had like way more agility, like he completely stood out in that sense. But again, Hutchinson is also a much smaller player. For me, this is a guy with his get off. Like this is, I don't know where he's going to go in the draft, but I'll tell you this, my grade continued to move up, especially when I understood more about his background and the position change, giving him a very high grade here, and this is something that will probably tweak a little bit as we get closer to the draft, but from what I went through so far, I'm going to bet on him. I'm willing to bet on this player. I'm also willing to bet that it's going to take some time, and that this is a guy that just immediately year one, you can expect production, but at the same time, if you bank everything on what he does year one, I think you could be a little bit, let down, because I think there's going to be real development that has to take place regardless of where he plays. If you push him back in the interior, he's going to have to develop the body type. If you push him on the outside, then you're going to have to really find a way to continue to develop that inside pass rushing game. But with that being said, I'm going to buy into the player that I've seen, and I'm going to give him a 6.7 grade. It's a very high grade for me. He's pushing that great tier as a player already, and I think, that could push into a back end of a first round. I haven't went through enough players to say, like, oh, yeah, he ranks here, but that's the kind of grade that could push into the back end of a first round, I believe. Maybe more of a early day 2 pick, but this is an awesome player to watch, and he stood out at the Senior Bowl. So to me, I'm buying into it. Darius Robinson out of Missouri. Let me know your thoughts in the comments below. Thank you, Brad, for watching, and I'm out.